Hello everybody, my English class. I'd like to introduce my best friend, Andrew Bagley, and he is another English teacher. And he and I always have these conversations about Shakespeare and the different plays and Elizabethan times, the way of thought at the time, the customs, because sometimes it can be different and alienating for modern day minds, particularly teenagers. And the Shakespeare that you're exposed to in high school are the plays that especially are meant to appeal to teenagers. And this is why, if you wonder why do we study Shakespeare, it's because so many things have not changed, and he's brilliant at displaying and conveying the concerns of humans and expressing the human condition. And with teens, they like to show, the first one they show you often is, I think you guys have done Romeo and Juliet, and you see Romeo dealing with the normal concerns of a teen at the time. And another one is Hamlet. And Hamlet is a lot more intense, because he's dealing with having to avenge the death of his father, plus all the normal things that come with adolescent concerns. A lot of them are very different today, but a lot of them are the same. I think most of them are the same. Anyways, I'm going to let Andrew explain. Okay. You're going to talk about the Renaissance or Elizabethan cosmology.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, Andrew, why don't you tell us what we have here? I'll sort of sit to the side. Andrew, he's written some stuff here to show you, and I'll be off screen, but I'll ask him questions.
All right.
As we're going along. Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. First of all, everybody, all my thanks for the opportunity to get these ideas out, and just hoping that they prove of some benefit when taking a look at the play. Now, with regard to plays like Romeo and Juliet, I am going to be speaking about that a little bit later on. However, one of the key points is that Hamlet is a story that plays on all three levels of the Renaissance cosmology: universal, social, and family. And as noted up here, God has a plan. The whole point being that just as humans go from the decision-making apparatus up here down to the feet, which are considered the bottom of the cleanliness ladder, the same thing applies to how God has organized the universe. So, we see in the universal level, God, of course, is at the top. God is perfect. Then we travel to the angels and archangels. Do they have some errors or some difficulties there? Well, we have seen in the Bible that does show up at least once. Then we get the cherubim, seraphim, and good spirits. So we're getting closer and closer to the material level as we move down. So the cherubim, seraphim, good spirits, these are things that are in contact with us, but we can't see. Then, of course, we've got humanity, or man, as they would have been called back during the Renaissance era. Then flora and fauna. Below that, demons and devils. And finally, of course, Lucifer, who traveled from being an archangel down to the bottom of the ladder. Why? Because he betrayed God. Then we take a look at the social hierarchy, which mirrors what we see in the universal. Of course, we've got the king, who is God's representative. Then, after that, we've got the nobles, and they, of course, have hold of the land and are administrating it on the king's behalf. Then the freemen, people who essentially don't have obligations to anyone. They are more or less allowed to take whatever course they please. Then the peasants, they work for people, and they are pretty much in paying all their lives. Then the serfs. Serfs, the defining point is that a serf owns only one thing: his or her labor, and that's all they ever have to be able to sell.
Just in case they're not familiar with serf, do you want to explain what serf is?
A serf is somebody who essentially, leading in with what has just been mentioned, owns nothing. They have no property, no heritage, nothing that they're going to be able to pass along. The only thing that they own is their labor. And so that's the only bargaining tool they have to work with over the course of their lives. Then, of course, you've got a slave. A slave owns nothing. A slave is owned. So that's the big difference between a serf and a slave.
Would it be akin to a servant and a slave?
Yes, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
Then we've got criminals. And, of course, criminals, bottom of the ladder, they have violated the social order by taking things that, of course, don't belong to them, be that property or life. Then we move on to the family. Family hierarchy, and of course, then we've got father, who is going to make all the decisions for the family. Mother, who will take the place if the father is not there. The eldest son, who is due to inherit the father's role. Other siblings, who are expected to perform their duties. Then the household servants, who are there to keep the household running. Then Spot, Fluffy the cat, they've got their place in keeping the household in order. And, of course, finally, the rodents and the vermin. Now, one of the key points being that for all three levels, it is possible to both rise and fall. Anybody who we see, and this has come up in a number of stories, criminals ending up redeeming themselves. They move up the ladder. Then, of course, stories about serfs and slaves, well, they may end up turning in criminals. And through that, they get pushed up the ladder. And, of course, there are always stories that have been written about, shall we say, demons and devils who end up rebelling against forces lower than them and end up being pushed up the universal ladder. Similarly, as we mentioned, Lucifer started off as an archangel and descended to the very bottom because he betrayed God. And we see much the same sort of thing occurring in the other hierarchies as well. One of the big points, though, is that when that we have to ask ourselves, what is the biggest betrayal that can take place? Is it when the lower orders rebel against the upper, or the upper betray the lower? Well, when Lucifer stages his plots against humanity, or forces higher than us, are we terribly surprised by this? Well, we're not happy about it, but it is something we expect. At the same time, we do not expect those forces above to betray those below. And we see in Shakespeare's plays over and over again, well, God is not going to betray anybody lower than his position. Why? Because he's God and he's perfect. However, we do see the king in Hamlet, Claudius, ending up betraying his country. How does he do so? He ends up killing his brother, a replication of the first biblical murder. And in addition, Hamlet Sr., where is he at the beginning of the play? He's certainly not in any place of afterlife reward. He is in hell. Why? Because he wasn't a good king. It's established very clearly that he engaged in a macho contest with Fortinbras Sr., and because he had betrayed his people, he ends up being sent down to hell himself.
Is this stated in the play?
Yes.
I don't
It's
remember.
stated in the play that he ended up basically getting into a big conflict with Fortinbras, who was Norway's king,
Yeah, I remember.
over who could be tougher, who was a better organizer of the militaries and so forth, who was a better tactician and strategist, and they ended up wasting their people's lives as a consequence.
Yeah.
So, we end up seeing Hamlet, who is, of course, right below the king, and is he the sort of individual who would make a good king? Well, we see at various points he launches criticism of Claudius's conduct, especially moments like where he mentions about how Claudius makes it a habit to go down and have a few with the boys. And Hamlet saying this is the kind of thing that's better observed in absentia than being committed. So I think through that, Hamlet definitely establishes himself as a more worthy successor to the kingship than his own father was. So we then take a look at the family hierarchy, and again, we see this coming through that Hamlet's father betrays him. Hamlet's father, again, what he asks for, what he demands of his son, what he should have asked for if he was a just father who had been murdered by his brother, I think we would probably expect him to demand justice. Instead, he demands revenge. And this is what instigates every act of tragedy throughout the play. It is my personal belief that if Hamlet Sr. had asked his son to get justice, well, then Hamlet, the character from the play, would have probably ended up getting Ophelia and Horatio as his frontline assistants, and the entire story would have turned into a Scooby-Doo mystery. And Claudius would have ended up being taken away at the end, saying, "I would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling kids." However, as a consequence, Hamlet, as a consequence of being told to seek revenge, Hamlet's life is destroyed. Yes,
Okay,
Mr. Oswald.
all right, but if you're saying, I forget how you phrased it, but you said that Hamlet Sr., the dead king, in asking to have his death avenged, that is the brings about all the tragedy. But I mean, what I'm wondering, and probably the kids are wondering, wouldn't you say it's Claudius murdering Hamlet Sr. that's caused the whole tragedy?
That has instigated injustice. What causes the tragedy, I believe, is Hamlet Sr. demanding revenge. That is the key word. When Hamlet Sr. says, "Avenge me," that is what starts off every act of destruction and self-destruction throughout the play. And we see this replicated in Polonius. Polonius is, in my opinion, one of the most tragic figures of the play because he is a character who speaks wisdom throughout, but is never able to apply it to himself. So he ends up betraying his daughter. He ends up wanting Laertes betrayed when he's away, wanting to have rumors spread about him.
Wanting to have rumors spread about Laertes?
Yes.
How? What do you mean?
Well, he says that he wants rumors.
Oh, yes. When he's talking.
Yes, about how making it look like Laertes is spending all his time partying.
Yeah, but okay. My understanding of that particular scene when he's speaking to those particular characters, he's only saying that to try to get people talking into a dialogue, it's sort of like, hey, I heard that Laertes guy, he's quite the party animal, to see if they'll react. And if they say, oh, yeah, he's crazy, I saw him last night, he was drunk and he was going off to a house of ill repute. Or maybe they'll say, like, Laertes? No, that doesn't seem like him.
Yeah,
he's only doing that to try to get information. He doesn't seem like he's desperate. Trying to spread
I think it is an act of betrayal on Polonius's part to even have that sort of thing brought up, to be launching those sort of that sort of rumor mill with regard to Laertes' conduct. He doesn't trust his son.
Okay.
And similarly, he doesn't trust his daughter. He keeps telling her about how Hamlet, main character, is not sincere about what he's doing. Why? Because that's the way he would do it. He would not be sincere.
Okay, but that's an extrapolation. Come on, how are you saying that just because that means that Polonius did that? Was like that. That's what he would have done. There's no evidence in the play about that. I mean, he's just being suspicious about teenagers in general, I think.
Possibly, but the point being, he is not willing to engage in any trust with regard to Hamlet's behavior. And in this respect, both Laertes and Ophelia prove themselves far more worthy than Polonius does.
Okay, I don't know if I agree about that. I see him as just being sort of a caring father. I see Polonius as having the usual stuff because I mean these kids will attest. They have parents that they're going to worry about, be concerned about them getting involved in romantic exchanges, which is going to happen in your youth, and they're going to have all sorts of warnings about the opposite sex, particularly females. They're going to talk about their daughters saying, oh, guys are just after one thing and don't trust them and this and that and the other thing. And you want to keep yourself away from those things and concentrate on your studies is most likely what they'll be saying. But Polonius, to me, he doesn't necessarily seem like he's anything more than just a caring father. Being worried about and cautioning his kids, both Laertes and Ophelia, about what they get involved with. But he gives wise advice, but some of it seems obvious advice, and he's portrayed as sort of a comic character.
Well, again, I would have to perhaps draw exception to that. Polonius, in my opinion, betrays his own children. He does. Is the advice that he gives to Ophelia something that perhaps has a basis in truth? Yes. However, he has not examined or questioned her with regard to her relationship with Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Has Hamlet conducted himself in an honorable fashion? Polonius does not seem to really care about that. And ditto, betraying Laertes as he does. Having these kind of rumors spread around. Again, certainly not what I would regard as a responsible father's conduct.
Now, what about Hamlet in the way he's interacts with Polonius? Because, well, first of all, in the whole cosmology, where's Polonius would be here with nobles, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yes, but Hamlet would be somewhat above him.
Yes.
Because he seems to be that way. Hamlet certainly he doesn't treat him with respect, and in fact, it's almost uncomfortable and bullyish the way he's mocking him, calling him a fishmonger and these sorts of things,
yes.
and making fun of him. And then, of course, well, although Hamlet didn't stab and kill Polonius on purpose, it was an accident. He was behind a curtain, but still, he didn't seem terribly upset.
No, he's not regretful about it.
He doesn't seem to have very much respect about Polonius. He thinks he's a fool. He's a buffoon, and he doesn't make a big deal of it. I mean, I think he's probably the most serious about it when he's concerned about Ophelia.
Yes. And that, again, is, I think, an indication of the stress the pressures that Hamlet is under, that he cannot find it in himself to extend sympathy to Ophelia over having killed her father. I don't think he would have had much respect for Polonius in any event, but the fact that he speaks so disparagingly of him, I think, is again an expression of the fact that he has seen the betrayal of parent toward child, again in his own situation especially, and is expressing part of that contempt towards Polonius and his conduct.
Yeah. I think it's sort of interesting when I think of youth. Sometimes if their parents are going through particular struggles, if they argue with the parents, it can often make, they're used to a parental figure being a sort of an anchor in their life. And when that sort of, parents are human beings and they'll go through difficult things, and then if they're finding some, if there's some sort of conflict that's going on with their child, you see the child sometimes acting up, out of sorts, which I think is really, that's what I love about Shakespeare and his whole knowledge of psychology. And another thing, things have not changed. How much do you think things have changed since the Elizabethan times for a teenager versus...
No, none of this has changed, and I think this sort of thing especially holds true in the corporate world, where, again, the employees are expected to express pure loyalty towards their employers. Mm-hmm. Their employers, in turn, are expected to look after and protect their employees. How often do we end up seeing employers betraying their employees?
Yeah.
Throwing them under the bus.
Yeah.
In order to extend or increase their own profits. Situations like Enron being a typical example, or Nortel in Canada.
Yeah.
Both those situations are pure replications of the Renaissance cosmology in an earthly setting.
Okay, so then this begs the question: how much has the Renaissance cosmology changed to our current state?
The only point at which I think we would see real alteration is in number one. We do not see the adherence to the universal part of the cosmology seen as a truth, as seen as a universal truth now.
Yeah, like written in stone.
Yeah,
right.
It's well, you can believe in that if you want to.
Yeah, and I think it's still there. It's just sort of hazy.
Yes, and with the social, well, where I think that most especially takes place is in the corporate world.
Yeah.
In the social world, we have tried to eliminate a number of these social definitions, and to have it that people are much more free to travel in between the different different designations. Mm-hmm. The big difference between them now is not in terms of heritage or in terms of what you were born as. It's how much you're making. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that can end up changing from moment to moment.
If, in a lot of Shakespeare's plays, you see the crux of it is this hierarchy being violated, whether it's the universal or social, or perhaps even on the family level. Is usually more I see it here. Macbeth kills Duncan and takes over the king, and then everything goes crazy.
Yes.
And it's as though I love the way all of nature is mirrored
yes.
in this whole hierarchy being destroyed.
Yes. It's like a body that has had an invading organism come in, and it must react. It's like your body getting a fever
Yeah.
in order to defeat an invading organism.
Right. But it's almost on a supernatural level. Also, it seems with
Yes.
with Macbeth.
Well, again, that was done mostly for the entertainment aspect, and King James I with his, and again, to repeat what had been said about him at the time, he was the most learned fool in Christendom.
Mm-hmm.
He was certainly not stupid, but at the same time, he was a pretty weird individual.
Mm-hmm.
So, just to quickly mention a subject that had been brought up before, Romeo and Juliet. That is the play where we see the family aspect most clearly played on, I think. And one of the aspects this comes through on the most is the conflict between the Montagues and the Capulets. Why are they fighting? They don't know. We don't know. They've always been fighting, so they're always going to be fighting. If anybody was going to clear this situation up, who would it probably be? Well, it would be the parents' responsibility to start speaking to each other reasonably and with logic. However, they never do so. Instead, it's the children who end up forming a bond with one another. And again, if the parents had been reasonable, they would have said, hey, our son, your daughter, are kind of starting to build something between each other. Maybe we can kind of use this as an excuse to call the whole thing to a halt. Instead of that, they end up damning their two children to destruction, and it's only at the end of the play that they end up saying to each other, maybe we should call it quits. So, as I said, we end up seeing this hierarchy replicated throughout a number of plays, and different aspects stressed. But I think it is in Hamlet that we see all three played on pretty much equally.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Everybody, thank you very much. I hope this has proved of some value to you while taking a look at this play. Again, Mr. Alzo may end up getting various questions on this, and if there's any particular value to it, I will certainly have no problem in answering them. Thank you very much.
Good. Oh no, that's gigabytes. Hang on, no, I pressed the wrong button.